Alright guys, today I want to do a video talking about my new favorite engine in Tengu plant format. And I think there's a lot of applications for this. I've been messing with this a lot in a lot of my decks, and if you already saw my worm profile, you probably already know what I'm talking about. So the card that we are kind of focusing on today is going to be Dark Mimic level 1 and Dark Mimic level 3. This is the generic engine. So just to give an overview of what these cards do, Dark Mimic level 1 is a flip monster. It says when it's flipped, draw a card from your deck, and then during your standby phase, you can send this face-up card to the graveyard to special summon one Dark Mimic level 3 from your hand or deck, right? Dark Mimic level 3's effect is that when it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you get to draw a card, and then if it was summoned by the effect of Dark Mimic level 1, if it gets destroyed by battle, you get to draw 2 cards. So, I like this engine for the very simple concept that this is a extra draw engine that puts darks in the graveyard. I think this is very good to supplement chaos strategies, and I know that historically in Tengu, I think there was a time where people discussed that Dark Mimic level 3 was like, I think this card got some hype for a little bit. I know people talked about it as a tour guide target, and but people were kind of like, well, why play that when you already are on Sangan? So it kind of got forgotten. And I think a big component of this that makes me think it's good is actually the Dark Mimic level 1. Like, yes, this card's a tour guide target, which also makes it pretty incentivizing to put into a deck. But Dark Mimic level 1, I think, has a lot of applications in terms of just adding a lot more draw power because, again, this card is a card that is always going to replace itself. And obviously it's at the cost of your normal summon, but in chaos strategies, you have chaos monsters for a reason. So like, you don't really care about a card costing your normal summon. This also has great synergies with things like Effect Veiler or Cat Sith because it's a level 1. So like, it's a level 1 dark. If they don't attack it and you flip summon it, draw 1, summon Veiler or Cat Sith, sink into 2. That puts a light and dark in graveyard, makes formula, lets you draw another card. I think that's pretty powerful, right? And then obviously if this card remains face up and can get the tag out, and then you can crash the Dark Mimic level 3 into something, that's going to become a draw too. So what I kind of like about this card is just like, for chaos decks, all the chaos monsters like BLS, Chaos Orc, sure, Chaos Orc's at 3 and BLS is at 1. You have a decent chance of opening one of them, but I think the biggest thing you really want to do is you want, in any chaos deck, you want to set up your graveyard with a lot of darks and lights, and then you want to draw into your chaos monsters. So I think these cards do both of it, right? Like, it supplements getting dark monsters in your graveyard, and then also gives you a nice draw engine to draw into your chaos monsters. Again, both of these cards always replace themselves. If you hard draw them, it's not a big deal. Just set it, let it die, draw a card, right? Not that big, unless obviously you're in a position where you're like really weak to board control or something like that. And obviously there's one glaring weakness with a card like Dark Mimic level 1, in the sense that if it gets blind mind controlled, it feels really bad, especially against the likes of plants, right? That's like the one drawback I'll say for this card. I did have that happen to me when I played Worms, and they could have like they can like make formula with this, so it's like flip, draw 1, then make formula, same thing. It's really painful on a mind control play, right? So that's like the one downside, but there's also a little bit of risk with like taking a Dark Mimic level 3 instead, stuff like that, unless they can like overlay with it or synchro with it. And obviously the downside to Dark Mimic level 3 is it has to be destroyed by battle, so in the event that you get a tag out, you kind of have to crash because your opponent is likely just gonna avoid attacking into it. But crashing isn't that big of a deal. The nice thing about Dark Mimic level 1 as well, which I kind of talked about in my Worm video, is its defense is 1000. So in a format where most people's turn 1 plays involve summoning a tour guide or even summoning a earth, like an agent of earth, they can swing into this and it'll flip it up, you get the draw, and it doesn't break the Dark Mimic level 1. So that means on your next turn, this will tag out into Dark Mimic level 3, and then you can crash with like their tour guide or their earth and draw 2 cards, and that's really, really powerful. Again, not really costing your normal summon or anything like that. So yeah, I am a really big fan of this engine and what it's capable of. And I mean, obviously we have the added benefit that it can be summoned off of tour guide. People typically want to summon Sangan off of tour guide, right? So tour guide goes into Sangan can be left on the field to get you a search, especially when you have like mind control or econ plays. People will use the tour guide as like fodder for like a synchro or an exceed, and they'll leave the Sangan to get a search. And the same thing can be applied to Dark Mimic level 3, right? Like, obviously it's kind of like discount Sangan, But if you're already on this like draw engine, I don't think it feels that bad. I think it actually feels really great. It kind of makes more tour guides live, so you don't ever have to go like tour guide into tour guide. You can just go tour guide into mimic. Like, it's not a big deal if you know, draw in, if you like use your mimic level 3 and then draw into your mimic level 1s. Like, again, this is just going to replace itself anyway, so who cares? And like I said, I think some people in like, when I played Worms, when they saw this like face up on the field after it flipped and drew me a card, people felt obligated to out this. Like, they were like, oh, that's scary, I don't want to give you that crash. And like, when I think about that, like, you know, I had this card get hit with a Scrap Dragon, so like, it's already replaced itself. If they're using Scrap Dragon to pop this card, they're losing a card, and I've already replaced it, so I don't give a shit if this stays, you know what I'm saying? So I think that's pretty cool. I think it's really good. And then another card that I think is very generic to help supplement the Dark Mimic strategy is going to be Call the Haunted. You can also technically do Limit Reverse because it applies to any of these, but the nice thing about it is, let's say you have a Dark Mimic in your graveyard, you have a Call the Haunted set. During your draw phase or your opponent's end phase, you can activate Call the Haunted and special summon it. If you summon this during your opponent's end phase, you do have the chance of drawing into your Dark Mimic level 3 on draw phase, which could feel kind of bad, but you can still summon from hand, so it's not like turbo game breaking. It's just a, you know, feels less good, which is why if you want to like kind of play into Maxi a bit more, like take a little bit of a chance, you can Call the Haunted in your draw phase, summon this back, and then tag it out. So if they were to Maxi, they also would get a draw too, right? So that's the downside. I think the tag out, it doesn't look like it's optional, so once you do that, you're committed. but yeah, basically, after you see your draw phase, you can bring back a Dark Mimic level 1, you can send this to the grave, summon out Dark Mimic level 3 from your hand or deck, and then you can just crash it and get a draw too. So like, that doesn't cost your normal summon, and that also can help you resource build if you're in a position where you're like low on card advantage. It kind of is like playing KFC or playing like a Karaz deck where Call the Haunted, when you Call the Haunted back at Karaz, you just target the call, target the Karaz, it becomes a draw 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, Call the Haunted just becomes a draw 2 card, and I think that's really cool, especially because of how versatile Call the Haunted is in Chaos decks. Obviously, once a Chaos Orc or BLS has been summoned successfully, you're free to Call the Haunted the card back, and that lets you do more things like banish more monsters. So like, this is already a pretty decent card in Chaos decks, but I think it becomes a lot better, obviously, when you're throwing in the Dark Mimic strategy. And of course, if Dark Mimic tags out, it leaves the dead Call the Haunted. So I could even see some weird like Falcon Punch applications to this, where you use this as a draw engine in Falcon Punch, and then can use like Miss Valley Falcon to bounce the dead Call the Haunteds. Something cool like that. I'm not really sure how applicative that is, but I mean, Falcon Punch is also on tour guide, so I do think it's like entirely possible. But yeah, so that's kind of like the core concept, and I do feel like there's a few decks that I could probably talk about that I think have a lot of applications to using these two cards, right? And like, I think the first one I kind of want to talk about is going to be something like Cat Sith Chaos, right? Basically, if you were to, like, a lot of people playing Cat Sith Chaos, they use things like Gravekeeper Spy into like Descendant, but this could kind of be a nice replacement for that, because again, Spy isn't a tour guide target, but Dark Mimic is, so there's a bit of an advantage there. And then also, since you're on Cat Sith, Dark Mimic level 1 can flip into a draw, and then the Cat Sith can be summoned to synchro into 2 and put a Light and Dark engrave and then draw you another card. I think that's pretty potent, pretty powerful. Obviously, I already talked about this card in Worms. If you guys didn't see this, like, the nice thing about it is if you activate W Nebula Meteorite and you flip up a Dark Mimic level 1, then it doesn't get reset. So like, if they can't clear it or can't attack over it, then during my standby, I can tag it out for this card and crash into it. It's also kind of just an easy side out, right? Like, it's literally just like running upstarts, where like, once you have them, it's like, okay, like, if I have better cards to make my matchup better, I can just get rid of these, right? It really doesn't matter that much. Another deck that I think could use this is like Piper Strategies. Dark Mimic level 1 is a level 1, right? So this can give you extra draws. And then again, Piper Chaos is typically on tour guide, so like running like a small engine of this, which, like, you know, you can actually go as heavy or as soft as you want with this. Like, you could go full 3/3 if you wanted to, but like, for example, for my Worm list, I just did 2 Dark Mimics and 2 Dark Mimic levels 1s, and then 1 Dark Mimic level 3. And I think that's more than enough. Like I said, if you draw into this card before you see these two, it's not like the end of the world, right? Like, it's not not like other level up monsters where like you have to like tribute summon to make it useful, right? Like this card is not dead in hand. You just set it and it dies. You can summon it and like exceed with it, you know, whatever. It's really not that big of a deal. It also applies some pressure or face up on the field where like if they don't want to attack into it, this can become exceed fodder or synchro fodder. It's kind of just a pesky card to deal with that is going to get you to your engine a bit faster. So again, when you like compare it to like Gravekeeper Spy, the advantage is it can flip, make a Utopia that'll get you a light and dark, which I do think is pretty good, but it doesn't really get you access to your chaos monsters any quicker. So like in a standalone setting, Gravekeeper Spy can feel a bit underwhelming, where this card can help you draw into your other strategies or your other powerhouse cards, which can then help you get to your chaos monsters, which I think could be a bit better, right? Like I think it's a bit of a trade-off. And I'm not really sure how insane this really is, but like I said, I think I've been playing it in a lot of decks and I think it feels really good. Another deck that I think you could use it in, so we have like Cat Sith, we have Piper. Again, I mentioned Falcon Punch. Because you're already on Call of the Haunted and Limit Reverse, this can just become a draw engine, even if it's very small, like even if it's just the 2-in-1, or even like you could literally do like 1-in-1. It's not the end of the world. It does have some applications just as being a draw card to draw into more of your back row, more of your stuff. Like Falcon Punch could definitely use a draw engine, I think. So I do think there's some applications there. I also have actually just ran a pure chaos build. I made a build for it, and maybe I'll put it on the screen, but it basically is just running like 3 copies of each of these cards, right? And and then it's running like Call the Haunted, Limit Reverse, Sangan, and like Kushano, and like it literally just Tour Guide is always live, always converting into an Exceeds play or into a big push. And it feels kind of good, like I won't lie, it really doesn't feel that bad. I'm running cards like Dark Armed, I'm running cards like Trag, because if like I can do plays where like it tags out, you can summon Dark Mimic level 3, crash into their monster, take the damage, draw 2, and summon Trag. So you guys can already understand how like that can probably have some pretty high pressure. Like it has a lot of power in itself, which I think is really, really cool. So I was playing basically like a Fiend Chaos deck. I even ran a copy of Dark Necrofear because of how easily these cards fill the graveyard with Fiends. And yeah, it felt pretty good. I might put the list up on the screen so you guys can take a look and see what it is, because it was a pretty cool deck. But yeah, I think that's basically it. I just kind of wanted to showcase this engine. I want to see what you guys think about it, like how you guys feel about it. See if any of you guys have been messing with it since you saw my worm video. Like I said, I do think there's a lot of applications to this, and I'd be curious to see if you guys can think of any other decks that this could apply to. But it is a lot of fun and a very undiscovered card in the format, I think. So yeah, I'd be definitely interested to hear your thoughts. But for the most part, I think that's going to wrap it up for this video, you guys. So we are just going to give a quick shout out to my patrons. So shout out to Wabi Adam, Eric Gagnon, Slap God, My Dude, Photo Shooty, and Brian Ford. Thank you guys so much for the support. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and have a great time.